that cover this Burke County area. One is South Carolina DHEC. They sample in the Savannah River right along Burke County. There's a large fishing community in Burke County. So though that sampling covers Burke County water, or people who are fishing in the Savannah River, SRS has 9 groundwater wells in the county. And it had historic air monitoring stations, and part of REMOP, one of the things that we're doing is putting the air monitoring station back in the county. And Southern Company's Plant Vogtle, through the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, does release all of their radiological environmental monitoring reports. So we have all 3 of those current monitoring data that we're talking about with the community. And then the 4th, the Georgia Environmental Protections Division monitored from about the early 70s to 2004 in the county, but they no longer monitor there, but we have their past historic data as well. And the community is really involved in figuring out what's in their environment, and people are really engaged in trying to understand better where they live. And part of that understanding, the EPA did a TANA assessment. This was a technical needs assessment that they did partnering with a consulting firm who sort of does this all the time. And I'm going to talk about the results of the TANA and then how we've taken the results and used that information to make REMOP a stronger education program. So the key recommendations from the TANA break down into these 3 categories. They did suggestions for communications outreach plan. They did suggestions to regularly consider community input and gave recommended topics. This TANA was, instead of changing a very focused idea with this TANA report that was only about radiological environmental monitoring, the EPA and their consulting group they worked with took this wide-ranging focus, so it didn't only include radiological monitoring information and what people didn't understand about that. It included sort of everything people in the Burke County area and Shell Bluff communities were nervous about or concerned about in their community. So it includes things like the economy and jobs and infrastructure that are outside of REMOP's goals, but is amazing information for the people in that community. So in their outreach plan, they suggested presentations and newsletters and engaging on social media, as well as checking in with the community through community leaders and groups, and to make sure to reach out to all the community members, not just a certain group that was engaged, to try and really make an effort to talk to people that really aren't interested in learning about radiological environmental monitoring, and to use multiple types of communication and outreach styles. They also gave a series of recommended topics and fact sheets, including Radiation 101, what SRS and Plant Vogtle are currently doing and how to learn more about them, and then local history and connections to SRS and Plant Vogtle. So for REMOP, we took these, the relevant recommendations, and put them into making REMOP the program that it is. For the outreach plan, I do monthly presentations at the Burke County Library. It's in Waynes, like sort of right on the edge of Waynesboro. Once a month I'm there. I give 4 talks a day about a topic of the month. So far we've covered the scientific method and contaminants in our lives, so taking a broad overview of where contaminants come from and how they can affect our bodies. I've done a Radiation 101 talk. Last month we talked about the 4 monitoring programs, and this month we're putting together a environmental monitoring report panel with experts from SRS and DHEC and Plant Vogtle to help people answer questions and see that it's just people on the other side of this really confusing data. We're producing a bi-monthly newsletter that we're sending out to a mailing list and an email list, so both snail mail and through the internet. And we're creating a web page on the SREL just our normal webpage through UGA, we have a remop section where we're putting all these resources. So all the lesson plans that I'm creating to give the talks are on that webpage for teachers to access, for people outside of Burke County to access, as well as notes and other information to let people know even if you're not coming, they can find the resources there. To regularly consider community input, we've established a community advisory council that we meet with every other month. Every month they review my lesson plan before I give it, and they give me really awesome feedback of, you know, we don't really care, like we know this part, but we don't really understand this part you talked about that you didn't really spend time with. Could you spend some more time doing this? Out of their review processes, they've given me more topics that, you know, we didn't think and the TANA didn't really come across people caring about, but through the Community Advisory Council, we've been able to identify more topics to cover that are more relevant to the people of Burke County. And we're working with local groups through the Georgia One local organizers, Janie and Natalie. We're doing, SREL has a history of environmental outreach, so we take our animals someplace and we talk about environmental stewardship and how amazing southeastern wildlife diversity is. I've started doing those talks in Burke County, and at the end I give a real quick, this is REMOP, this is what we're doing. We'd love to have you come to our open meeting. So using groups that are more interested in learning about animals, but still being able to talk about the radiological environmental monitoring programs so that there's awareness is being created about these projects and these monitoring groups that people sometimes aren't even aware of. And then for every month, we're creating fact sheets that we're going to distribute through our programs, but also have them available on that REMOP webpage. It's sort of a summary brochure of what the actual lesson is. So even if someone starts attending REMOP talks next March, they'd be able to at least read and have access to some of the information we've been providing since June of this year. And what we're doing with resources is, what I've found and what we found is that there are a lot of resources available to the public. It's just that sometimes they're not intuitive to find, and sometimes the public doesn't even know that they can find them or that they're available. So what we've been doing is taking all of these agencies, state and federal, local advocacy groups, industry, and universities that have resources like emergency preparedness. And as far as UGA extension, you can, if you're a UGA or if you're a Georgia resident, UGA extension, you can get mercury testing for your human health, you can get radon testing for your home, you can get heavy metal, soil, and water testing as much as you want for like $5, and just making people aware that those resources are available past the duration of this REMOP project. And we're gathering all these resources and information and bringing it to one place and providing it to people at our talks. And the one place right now is the REMOP webpage, but through Natalie and Janie, we're hoping that the city and the county will sort of take over that host of resources so that even if REMOP loses its webpage or something else happens, that information stays in one spot and is accessible to everybody. And again, those fact sheets that we're creating at SREL will also be considered as a part of those resources. I put this in here in case we were running out of time, but I'm just going to skip to the last few slides before we have questions. These last couple slides are where REMOP is going to go for the next year. We're going to continue the monthly talks at the Burke County Library. They're open public events. If you're interested in going to Burke County, we would love to have you at one of our talks. Our next talk is the Monday after Thanksgiving, November 27th. We can also add you to our remop mailing list so you can get email updates about when we're having public events. We'll start data collection and analysis in 2018, and we're hoping to keep expanding our talks to local groups and organizations. So if you have a local group in Burke County, I would love to come talk to your group. And at this point, I really do want to thank everybody who has been talking to us and working with us so that we can get our data collection in order. We've been going through a lot of protocols, and everyone has been super collaborative and helpful in getting that underway. And the second year education plan will mostly focus on the data. So I've been sort of building up right now to start understanding what the data means and what these values are and where they come from and how they're calculated. And so we have like a group of 20 people that have been consistently coming. So we're going to start diving into the more complicated and hard to understand data aspects. And one of the things we're doing is all the data from the 4 monitoring programs, the 3 current and the 4th historic from Georgia EPD, we're putting them all on the same graph with the limits so that the public will be able to see something that's a little bit more digestible than a value that's a number that's a little bit more abstract. And this is sort of what a typical community talk looks like. We have a table similar to this. People come in and sit down, and we mostly have a discussion about the topic for that day. And then as far as samples go, this is a quick summary of the samples we'll be taking, and we'll be sending out the radiological samples to an independent third-party lab, as well as, but the heavy metals will be done at SREL, and then we'll take into account the current and historic data. So that the main goal of REMOP is so that community members feel confident in accessing the data that's already accessible. All 3 of the current monitoring programs you can get on public websites, and then comfortable and confident reading those reports and being able to ask questions about them. So with that, if you have any questions, again, I want to thank everybody who's been supporting this project, Georgia One, SRS, South Carolina DHEC, Georgia Power. Everybody's been so open to our questions and making sure that this project is a success. And we at SREL really, really appreciate that. So with that, do you guys have any questions?
Let's start with Dawn.
Dawn Gillis-Cab, thanks for your presentation. You're doing a great job.
Thanks.
Just had on your monthly meetings at the library, I saw the pictures there kind of answered a little bit, but I wanted to know typically how many attend. You said it was about 20.
Yep.
Do you see a change? Do you see more people coming, different people coming as you're going along to get other groups in there, and so that more of the basic population of the area are being represented?
So the first talk, there was a lot of people because it was the first talk.
Mm-hmm.
After that, things sort of declined down to that core group of 20 individuals. This past month, Natalie used Facebook Live, and so we had 10 people in the room. When she went Facebook Live, we added 49 people.
Oh, great. Good.
So yeah, that is something that we're definitely going to be doing in the future. People seem more willing to watch it on Facebook than to come to the library.
Good.
So that's a strategy that we're going to be implementing in the future.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for a great question.
Doug, I think I saw yours go up next.
Doug Howard, Cap. This might sound like a very good presentation, but this might sound like a crazy question. But what is the main complaint, the number one complaint of those there in Burke County?
A lot of, so there's a group of people that feel that their health has been negatively affected in living adjacent to Plant Vogel and SRS. I don't, just in my observation, I don't have data for this, is that the majority of Burke County doesn't feel that way. There's just sort of a misunderstanding. So the goal in helping people understand the environmental monitoring reports is hopefully to allow people to better understand the effects of living next to these plants on their health. One of the reasons we have heavy metals included is to make sure that lead or mercury is not a problem. But I think that that's everybody's main concern is health. They're like, what is this doing to my health?
From the water or what?
From everything.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in the Shell Bluff community, which is a more rural community in the northeast section of the county, live off the land. They live, they eat fish from the river, and they hunt, and they grow their own food. And so there's a lot of concern about just living like that, how the radiological aspect can affect their health.
Michael McLane is DOE. Let me see if I can expand on your remarks just a little bit to give you a little more complete answer as well. Recall the REMA program had its origin in a recommendation from the CAB, which was to go off and look at, understand what happened with to the Georgia monitoring. Why did Georgia DNR decide to stop? And one of the things we were partnering with WAND at the time, and we met with them, and what they communicated to us, and one of the reasons why we set up the REMOP, was that the community, there was a belief within the community that the cancer rates were a little bit high in the area. They didn't know whether it was due to heavy metals, radiation, et cetera, although none of the previous historical data had shown any issues with it. As part of our outreach, we targeted at looking at any of the obviously radionuclides that could be emitted from the Savannah River site, and any of the metals or any other toxics that were produced on the site, to be able to give the community some insights into what's going on. So we tried to create an outreach program that would also give them some information that if there was something going on there, the toxins and heavy metals wouldn't transport up gradient or up the river or up the groundwater gradient to the Shell Bluff community, but we had a legitimate reason to go craft the outreach program along those lines to address the community concerns. So that's kind of what they were concerned with. They believe they have a hot spot there. They don't know why. And as part of our outreach, we're helping them understand what the data is, and it'll give them some insight as to what's actually there, if there is anything there.
And just one more, Michael, is this the same? Do they have the same concerns, say in Hanford and other plants throughout the United States? I mean, is it the same concerns of the citizens that live around these plants?
Every DOE site has the community surrounding the plants that are concerned. They have and that's one of the reasons why we release the annual site environmental reports, is to be able to give the communities that. Shell Bluff was a little unique in this case because recall at one point in time historically in the 90s, very early 2000s, the department funded and we currently still fund DHEC's environmental monitoring, where they do a quality assurance check on what we're reporting. We had been doing that under Georgia, and I think the 2004 timeframe chose to discontinue the program. And therefore Shell Bluff became a little more concerned about, oh, well, nobody's overlooking us. So it really, I think, primarily, Shell Bluff is a little bit of a unique artifact in that it arose from the fact that Georgia DNR relies on the South Carolina DHEC program to do the quality assurance instead of continuing to do it on their side of the river.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Joyce Underwood, CAB. This was really interesting. I enjoyed this immensely.
Well, thank
Lots
you.
of good information. I have a lot of questions. My first one is there any relationship between REMOP and the Burke County Health Department?
No, so we are working to see, I'm in talking with them to see what resources they have available just as a part of that resource gathering initiative. and we're working on that.
So it's kind of like in flux.
Yeah.
Okay. Will this expand to any other counties, or is it based solely on the needs of Burke County?
Right now, we're funded for Burke County, but in making the lesson plans, I do give examples specific to Burke County, but the lesson plans are transferable to other areas or any teacher that wants to talk about contaminants in our lives and where they come from, or radiation. So there is the potential for expansion.
Okay, and you mentioned your budget. That was my next question. Where does your budget come from, and is that split somehow with Plant Vogel?
No, so we're fully DOE funded.
Okay, so you're basically helping Plant Vogel,
So
sort of.
Yeah, so because Plant Vogel is in Burke County and it's a major source of jobs in the county and the county's economy, I think it's 50-50. When people ask me questions, about 50% of them are solely about Plant Vogel. So even though DOE is funding us, REMOP is answering questions and addressing questions and talking about Plant Vogel and their environmental monitoring.
Does Plant Vogel have any interest in helping?
Yeah, so Plant Vogel or Georgia Power representatives often attend their public events, and they're all Burke County residents, so they often come to our talks. They are going to be on our expert panel this month, which I think is really awesome. So slowly we're strengthening that, I think.
So a relationship is being created.
Yeah.
And then you said, you don't have numbers on your slides, but this is on the one about the recommendations from TANA.
Mm-hmm.
You said that you regularly consider community output and reach out to all groups in the community. How are you working to achieve that?
So Georgia One has 2 local organizers. They are really awesome community leaders, and so we're reaching out through their networks. We also have our Community Advisory Council, which is made up of community leaders from all different backgrounds. So we have farmers and fishermen and nurses and county official. She's running for city council. So we have people through Janie and Natalie's networks, but also people that are leaders in the community to bounce ideas off of and make sure that REMOP is providing a service that addresses needs that people actually have, and not just going in there and talking about radiological environmental monitoring programs and people don't care.
Okay, and my last question is super quick, and hopefully you know it. What is the population of Burke County?
It's the largest county in Georgia.
Really?
It is.
Land mass or population?
Land mass, and definitely not population. Yeah, it's pretty small. I don't have a number, but like a large university campus, probably like 80, like that's about it. When I say Waynesboro is the city, it's really like a small town. I mean, and then everything else is really farm. But yeah.
I guess I can look that up. Thank you.
It's smaller than Aiken.
So
22,000. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Michael did too.
Yeah, so small.
This is smaller than where I come from. Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Have you been there? Thank you very much. Eleanor?
Eleanor Hopson, CAB. Most of my questions have been answered. However, Megan, you and Juan have really done a great job in Burke County trying to educate the population.
Mm-hmm.
I urge you to continue to do that, and there's a great population of young people there who may not be as aware as the older citizens about SRS.
Mm-hmm.
And primarily they are focusing on Vogel, Plant Vogel. And I urge you to continue to educate the communities in Burke County.
Thank you.
Bob Smith, CAB. It was a very good presentation, and I think it's a great effort. My question is, how how's this disseminated to the communities at large, other communities, Aiken, Savannah, wherever, so that the teachers know that this information is available to them and that they could use it for the education of the youth and the local communities?
So right now we are solely funded to work in Burke County on this project. The putting all of our information on the website is just sort of like an added bonus. So right now I'm really focused on making sure that content is good and of quality. But when we do get asked to come to schools as a part of our normal environmental outreach program, we do say now that we can talk about radiation and contaminants in addition to our environmental diversity and wildlife talks. But that's something to do in the future, is to definitely, once the majority of the talks are on the webpage and the resources are sort of cleaned up a little bit, advertising that those are available. That's something that a lot of land grant universities do, is creating content and making it available to the public. So we're working on with UGA Extension to see how they do it, and then expanding from there.
I guess so. In summary, it's not disseminated to anybody other than Burke County.
So yeah, we're not walking out and telling people in Aiken that the teachers have access to this. It is publicly accessible, but that's not to say we're not going to do it in the future. It's just right now, because we're funded solely in Burke County, we're making sure that Burke County is taken care of. And I am working with the middle school there, and so the teachers at the middle school know that those are available.
Okay.
I guess just as a side comment, this seems a bit one-sided. If the DOE is funding this, then why isn't it more an at-large effort than just focused specifically? And I understand it was initially set up for that, but you know, we can't put on blinders.
So Michael McLane's Department of Energy. Bob, I mentioned previously the genesis of this was a CAB recommendation. None of the data from our annual site environmental reports that we do show that if there is anything out there that it could possibly, and nothing that we've released from the site through groundwater migration, air, et cetera, has been propagating off-site to represent a hazard that be causing the hotspots that the community perceives. Because they brought an issue in front of the CAB and the CAB had a specific question regarding it, the department committed to enhancing the outreach program that we currently have at the lab. The lab already has an outreach program where they make this information available to all the communities. To enhance the Burke County one to deal with the specific concerns the citizens brought to this CAB, we chose to go enhance it by actually going out into the field and gathering some samples. This is not going to be an enduring program that lasts for the next 20 years. It's to go help this community understand how the environmental data is compiled and actually obtained by getting them involved in the collection of the information, the choosing where to sample within the community, and teaching them a little bit. We have not perceived the need for a broader community outreach or information process. So no, there are no plans to go do it more broadly. We're just dealing with the one specific point that was brought before this board.
Thank you.
David, is that yours?
Yeah. David Holt, CAB. You know, the thing that strikes me in looking at the map you presented in your briefing, that this community that has this concern is literally in the shadow of the Vogel plant, yet they're pointing fingers at SRS, whose emissions are obviously dwarfed by anything that could be being released by the Vogel plant, yet Vogel is really only taking a token representation in this effort. So I find that very odd and lopsided. Nevertheless, there's this concern that there may be a hotspot of health effects in this community. has that concern been validated by any state or local health department reports or investigations?
No.
So it's just certain people's opinions?
It's perception.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Okay. So that's all of our questions for this. Nina sent me a text message. She asked if we could take a quick 5-minute break. We are running right on time, but please, if we can, 10:35, be back in your seats. Jeff Bentley and Penn Mason are going to start with or without you. So 10:35, make it back, okay?
And I have to duck out to actually give a presentation in Burke County, so I'll be here for the break. But please feel free to contact me or anything like
Can
that.
you actually share your contact
Yeah.
info? We don't have it on the back. It might have got
Got a good number back. Let's go ahead and get started as folks straggle in and they can find their seats. Up next, we have Jeff Bentley with DOESR and Penn Mason with SRR. They're going to give you an update on what they're working on. So if we could give them our attention, thank you very much.
Thanks, Rick. All right. Testing. So as James mentioned, I'm Jeff Bentley. I'm with the Department of Energy. I'm with the Waste Disposition Program on site. With me is Penn Mason. He's a senior project manager. He runs the tank closure cesium removal project. So in October of 2016, the Department of Energy and the state of South Carolina entered into a dispute resolution agreement. And for that, it was for supplemental salt treatment. And that's why I'm here today, to talk about the tank closure cesium removal project. The Fukushima disaster, as tragic as it was, did result in a fully functional ion exchange treatment technology that was useful for treating radioactive source material. So the department decided to build on this and use that same treatment technology to treat waste in our tanks. And not only does this technology here help treat the tank waste, but it also helps to empty the tank, which goes to satisfy bulk waste removal requirements that are milestones under the Federal Facilities Agreement. So some of the usefulness characteristics of this technology is it's a mobile at-the-tank treatment. It will continue to treat salt even when the salt waste processing facility goes down. They do not share any resources. The modularity of this system allows you to adapt it to varying feed streams. So when you complete the treatment on the first tank, we can move it to a different tank and treat that salt waste. Although this is currently being built and built and assembled off-site, the actual waste processing will be performed by site staff who are trained in the operation and maintenance of the TCCR unit. It's a simple concept where waste will flow through a bed of resin that has a very high affinity for the adsorption of cesium. That resin that we are using is called crystalline silicotitanate, or hereafter referred to as CST. I mentioned the Fukushima, development of the technology at Fukushima. One of the other things that came out of that is there were numerous suppliers available who could implement this technology. DWPF is our current path right now for disposal of the resin that I mentioned. However, there may be opportunities to engage in looking at possible off-site places to dispose of the resin as well. But as of right now, this material would go through the Defense Waste Processing Facility. So you should see the little diagram here. That is an actual ion exchange column and shield assembly. The column itself sits inside the shield assembly. That's where the resin is located. It could technically be removed from the shield assembly. That is not how we will operate this unit. The shield assembly and the column will stay together at all times and be put into storage together until you finally sluice the resin out to be disposed of. Okay, this picture here is the sort of what the process assembly looks like. It has a ventilation skid attached to it. You're going to see some pictures later when Penn takes over showing you the internals of this unit. But the actual demonstration on the Tank 10 that we're going to do is scheduled, well, it's planned for May, from May to August of next year, 2018. We're going to treat approximately 750,000 gallons. All depends on how much it takes to dissolve the salt that's in Tank 10. This material will go through at approximately 0.16 curies a gallon, and each of the columns right now, as our baseline is, each column will be loaded with about 25,000 curies. So from that estimate, you can gather there's 4 columns, 25,000 curies apiece. There's about 100,000 curies that we're going to be pulling out of the waste from Tank 10. Let's see. What's driving us in this demonstration for the decontamination factor, it will be over 1,000, and that's driven by the waste acceptance criteria at Saltstone right now. We actually expect that the decontamination factor will be more likely 5,000 to 10,000, but at a minimum, it's 1,000 to meet the waste acceptance criteria at Saltstone. Following the demonstration, the department has agreed to deliver to the state of South Carolina a technology and feasibility report that's going to look at the things that we found from this demonstration, as well as using this unit again, and the possibility of building a second TCCR unit to implement into our salt program. Pretty high level conceptual diagram. As I mentioned, this waste that we're treating is in Tank 10. What we're going to do is we're going to dissolve the salt that's in there. We're going to pump that to the TCCR unit where it will be treated. The decontaminated salt solution that comes out of the TCCR unit will then go into Tank 11, where it will sit until it's tested, make sure it's okay, and then it will feed over into Tank 50. We'll pump it to Tank 50 for eventual disposal, because Tank 50 is our feed tank for the Saltstone processing facility. The spent resin that's in the column, once we load it as far as we can, it will be drained. The resin will remain in the canister that's in the shield assembly. We will take that, lift the whole unit out, that whole assembly out, transfer it to what we call the interim safe storage. This is basically a pad that will be located in the tank farm. Probably have will be seismically qualified so that you got the assurance that these things are in a safe configuration and cannot pose a danger in the event of an accident. So a little segue here. Here's our picture of our H tank farm. What we're looking at are tanks 9, 10, 11, and 12. This 4-pack right here, this is the area in which the TCCR unit will be located. To give you more specific details, I'm going to turn this over to Penn Mason.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Okay, as Jeff said, I'm Penn Mason. Thanks for inviting us today and sharing our project with us. Jeff pointed out, he's already talked about H Tank Farm. I'll now actually zoom in on the 9 through 12 series of tanks. This is an actual picture of the tank farm, and then you can see a highlight there. Our ticker unit is going to be placed in this area. You can see it right there. That's the actual processing skid. Okay. We'll have an adjacent ventilation skid that I'll show you pictures of in just a second. Control skid will be off to the side. We will process out of tank 10. So tank 10 will do dissolution first and then process up to the ticker unit. From the ticker unit, we go through the ion exchange columns. Our DSS drops to tank 11. That's our dissolved salt solution. It's clean in tank 11. Obviously, before we put anything in there, we'll have to empty it out, treat it, make sure everything's clean. That's in our plan. And then the third line that you see coming back to tank 10, that's what we call the recycle line. There is a sump in the actual enclosure itself. The sump jets back to the tank. And also that line is also used for backwashing our pre-filters. Again, cycles back and drops back down into tank 10. So that you can see is a conceptual layout of the ticker project. All right, so moving on to the next slide, give you a quick status. We awarded to Westinghouse Electric Company in July 2016. To date, they have finished their design, they have finished their assembly, and they're into testing. I talked about the 3 skids, processing skid, which is an enclosed skid, the ventilation skid, and a control skid, which is basically just a shed with our process controls and computers in it. Testing's incomplete today. We're showing here that this will be delivered in late November. During testing, we've had a couple things pop up, a few discrepancies that we're dealing with, nothing long-term, but I don't think we're gonna make late November as we thought a few weeks ago when we put these slides together. We've got to work through those. We're still in pretty good shape though. Our balance of plant work and utilities, these are basically the services, the transfer lines, the electrical, the water that ties into the unit, and all of that work is ongoing. Our safety basis work is ongoing. We hope to submit our SCR to DOE by Christmas, and our regulatory approvals are all progressing. Most recently, we got our construction permit, and just this past week, we also received permission to reuse tank 11. So all of that's working on. The pictures that you see to the side here, these are all fabrication pictures. That picture right there is an actual picture of the 4 columns laying down as their fabrication was completed before they were put into their lead assembly. And that is the pre-filter assembly there, and you can see some other photos of piping and electrical term work going on. Down at the bottom, you can see, first of all, our slab being poured for the enclosure, and at the bottom here, hard to see, but you can see some DNR work, some dismantling and removal work that had to be done in tank 10 before we can put our new equipment in. Moving to the next slide, you'll actually see pictures of the 3 skids. These are the process skid here. This is the outside of it. Okay, door on this side, all the process work over here. It contains 4 columns. So 4 columns will be engaged, kind of cartridge type filters. For the test that we're going to talk about in just a minute, there's 1 column inserted. So there are 3 columns out to the side. 1 column is now inserted. This area is where all the terminations and everything are. And out this side right here, you have wiring going over to your control skid. Not a great picture. You can see we're work in process. It is a shop environment, so we've got some boxes right in front there. But that is the process skid. Over on the far side, or the left-hand side of the process unit, is where the ventilation skid is. For the test apparatus, the ventilation skid is actually outside this building. The process enclosure and the control skid are both on the inside. You can see just the opening right there where some light is coming through. That's actually a big roll-up door, and they've got the ventilation skid right on the outside of the roll-up door there. Inside the process enclosure, here is the 1 column that is actually in the process enclosure. It is on this side facing us right around in this area. And you can see the rest of the process piping. That right there is the shielding assembly around the pre-filters. You can see quite a bit of internal work inside the enclosure. Moving on, these are 3 pictures of the actual columns that are not being used for the test. This is an actual column right here. just in front of its shield assembly, which is right behind it. They're in a vertical position right now. You can see the lines coming off the top. The inlet, the outlet, there's a sluice line and a vent line. So there are 4 lines that actually come out the top of the column there. And these columns have actually been loaded with the actual CST, and they've been placed over to the side, waiting for the delivery. Okay, so Jeff has already touched on a little bit of this. I'll touch on it also. This is a demonstration. This is what Ticker gives you, and we're pushing increased salt throughput and accelerate waste removal. That's what we're trying to do. Jeff's already talked about it. That's the purpose of what we're trying to do here, and that's what Ticker does for us. You enable waste treatment when SWPF down. Jeff already talked about the fact that we're not connected to SWPF. So if anything happens at SWPF, we keep running. So again, a good backup plan if anything happens there. We talked about demonstrating the modular technology. We did not talk about the targeted treatment capability, but CST has an affinity for cesium-137. It's been tested for about 20 years or so. We've been trying to put it into place for multiple times, and it has a tremendous affinity for cesium-137. So therefore, we're calling it targeted treatment for that specific decon factor based on cesium-137. All right, large-scale radioactive test bed to demonstrate other related technologies. If you wanted to, you could use this particular column in the shell. You could change out the resin. You could treat different waste streams even with other non-elutables or elutable resins, which leads into, potentially at the end of the SWPF life, you could have some unfavorable waste streams that you're trying to adopt. You may want to look at some type of ion exchange technology. A thought there that you could eliminate the DWPF recycle line coming back to the tank farm. And then finally, and you've probably heard about this already, but our sister site at Hanford is looking at a similar sister unit to tank closure cesium removal. They're calling it tank side cesium removal, but it's TCCR number 2. And they're actually considering using that to supplement their law PS waste stream. So that is the end of our presentation. And any questions for me or Jeff?
Well, let's start down at the end over here. Whose card is that? Mary, is that yours?
Yes, it is mine, Mary Weber Cab. Thank you for your presentation. I've got one question. Well, maybe 2-part. Is this proprietary technology, and how, if at all, is this affected by the new liquid waste contract that was awarded last month?
Okay, I'll answer part 2 first. Okay, it is not affected. Any contracts that are currently in place will extend over to the new contractor. So number 2 is not an issue. Item number 1, Westinghouse has claimed limited rights and proprietary information as SRR is feeding that through us to DOE. Department of Energy has ruled and said, no, we don't believe that's the case. And so we have now sent a letter back to Westinghouse and asked them to remove all limited rights marking and intellectual property by the end of November. So we're waiting to the end of November to see if they say good and they just do it, or if they have any feedback that they want to give us. You want to add anything to that, Jeff? So we're working the issue.
So thank you. So we can expect an update on that maybe at our next full board meeting?
Okay with me.
Okay, thank you.
For you, Mary. Narendra?
Narendra Malak Cab. Thanks, Ben.
You're welcome.
I have maybe 2 or 3 questions tied together. First is that your first presenter mentioned that cesium resin will be disposed of in DWPF. how are you going to transport it? Is it going to mix with the sludge to go to DWPF, or how are you going to treat it to send it to DWPF?
Okay. So the end of our demonstration is that we put the columns out at an interim safe storage pad that is intended to carry a lifespan of 10 years or better. At this time, that's as far as we go. We have built a sluice line into the columns so that the spent resin can be sluiced out and then placed back into a sludge batch and then go to DWPF. The capability is there. We do not want to, of course, have an orphan waste stream. 435 doesn't allow that. And so that is our primary course. While on the interim storage safe pad, we are investigating, as Jeff pointed out, other ways to dispose of that waste, and we are considering off-site disposal.
My next question is the filtrate. Will it meet the WAC for saltstone?
Yes.
Number 3 question. You have a air exhaust. Is it part of the construction permit?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Joyce Underwood, cab. First of all, I like how you guys are thinking ahead. I think that's really awesome. My question has nothing to do with that. It's actually regarding what Mary asked. So you are waiting to hear back from Westinghouse about their intellectual property claim.
Correct.
If they tell you no, is that going to result in litigation?
I'm not a lawyer. we hope not.
Point, it will become a legal, it really is already a legal issue. They're working the letters back and forth, the legal departments. And I'm sure that the department will take action if it comes back, you know, that they refuse to remove those markings.
Well, in that event, how is that going to affect your contract with
It's not going to affect the contract with Westinghouse, the current contract. It would not affect the demonstration. The only potential impacts from this type of litigation and stuff would probably be moving forward if you were to want to build another unit or purchase more, you know. Correct. Basically, where could we go to buy that?
So
That's
it'll
what it would
impact
affect.
your future relationship, not your current relationship as it stands.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
We've got enough hardware to do our job here on Tank 10, so it affects the future.
Okay. Thank you.
Dawn Gillis, cab. I was under the impression that in salt waste, strontium was also an issue. Am I wrong in that? Is this just taking, this is obviously just taking cesium-137 out, but I thought cesium and strontium were issues in salt waste.
Okay, try to answer that. And I'm not a process chemistry person, but we have proved in the last year or so that actinide removal, strontium and anyway, showing my process chemistry knowledge. Those are not required to meet the saltstone WAC. So you don't have to remove those through an actinide removal process before you process at Ticker. Today, we're not using ARP prior to MCU. So when MCU comes back online in the next couple of months, we are actually processing directly through and not going, or MCU, and not going through an ARP process. So actinide removal has not been an issue, and I believe there was a position paper put in place by our Steve Thomas and his organization about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, that actually stated that actinide removal was not required for saltstone. So, like I said, I'm not an expert at this.
Yeah, that was our basis for eliminating the MST strike for the ARP MCU process. It still runs through the crossflow filter to remove the insoluble solids, but we don't strike it with MST anymore. And so the insolubles are still in there, but the solubles are still in there, but what we found is there's not, first of all, there's not enough in the stream to violate the waste acceptance criteria at Saltstone. And
Not
then
enough strontium?
Yeah, no, not.
Is that just this tank, or is that in general?
Thus far, from what we've processed thus far, nothing has been, and I believe this tank have we pulled a sample yet?
We've pulled samples from this tank.
So we've pulled, we'll continue to pull samples for our batch when we batch the salt, and that will be part of that. That's part of that list that you go down and verify that it meets the acceptance criteria.
Interesting, okay.
And apologize for not being an expert in that field.
All right, thank you.
Doug?
Doug Howard Cap, you said that Hanford is also building one of these ticker units.
Yes.
Are they going to wait till after you all do your test before they start, or are they already in the process?
They are just at the initial stages. They're just putting their project plan together. They're just putting their contracts together. So the answer is yes. They're going to wait until we finish our testing before they actually move forward. But we're looking at having at least our factory acceptance test done very soon, and they're just initializing their project now, so we're quite a ways ahead of them.
Thank you.
Susan?
Susan Corbett, Cab. I mean, potentially we should be very excited about this, because it's good to get that cesium out of there. But you said something about shipping it off-site. Now, is it going to be considered high-level waste at that point? If you ship it off-site, what are you going to greater than Class C? What is it?
Greater than Class C.
So what are your options here? Are you looking at Utah? Are you looking at Texas?
The consideration would be WCS at Texas, but they don't have the regulatory approvals for that at this point yet. But that's the most likely path.
Also, so you're talking about sitting it on an interim pad.
Correct.
Is that just until you have a place for it to go, or is it that what that interim is for?
Yes.
And what compromises interim? 10 years, 20 years, 50 years?
10-year design
10
life.
Yeah.
10 years, okay. And then the units themselves, will they be highly radioactive when they're done?
We should be able to flush everything out and get it down to very low rates.
Okay, so it could go into Barnwell. Or you could be land buried here, is that what you're thinking?
Quite possibly, yes.
Okay. That mountain that Bill Lawless talked about yesterday is getting bigger. So, thank you. Very informative, very informative.
Good.
Thank you, Susan. David?
David Hoyle, Cab. Jeff, what's the NEPA coverage for this project?
The NEPA coverage. We had
I know air and water, I believe.
Yeah, it is.
No, I'm not talking about permitting. I'm talking about
I'm looking for
environmental review.
Getting a construction permit for the water, of course, and we've submitted an air permit, so water and air.
That's environmental permitting. What I'm referring to is the National Environmental Policy Act review process for any new project.
We completed a NEPA checklist at the beginning of the project. It did not show it didn't screen out to show that we had any issues with it.
I see. So you went with a categorical exclusion.
Beginning of every project, we do that.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And how, these units could potentially sit on a pad for 10 years. How confident are you after, say, a 10-year period of them sitting there that you'll still be able to sluice this resin out of them and they don't just solidify or something and become a problem in that regard?
So there have been tests at SRNL over time, dating back even prior to the old Skids project, which was 2009 to 2011, about sluicing spent resin out of columns. And to this point, we have seen no issue with that. We believe we'll be able to do it. We've got flow sheets and calcs to back it up. And so obviously we've never had it sitting in a column for 10 years. But all the engineering that we've done, plus all the laboratory and analytical analysis, says that we should not have an issue with it.
Thank you.
Gil Ellensworth Cap. Thanks a lot, guys. With the potential, well, you said it's not going to get delivered in November. It's already been pushed out. How far can it be pushed out to where May to August of next year is still a realistic time for the demonstration?
Not too far. Not too far. We're looking at a month to 2 months, but not a whole lot further than that. If we push out, if it pushes out anything, we're looking at options to bring pieces down here. If we can get some of our pieces down early to start the installation process, I'll throw an example out. The ventilation skid, we finished all testing on the ventilation skid. I could take acceptance today. So all of that is passed, the ventilation skid is done, I could bring it down today. The 3 columns that you saw up there loaded with resin, I could bring that down today.
And what is the total project cost?
Total project cost is slightly over 25 million, about 26 to 27. We're looking at high end, won't go over, we said 30.
About 30, yeah.
I don't think it's gonna go that high.
And remember, that's project, that's everything. That's design, build, this is what the balance of plant here at the site to get the tank ready. It's everything combined for this demonstration is a little over 25 million.
Thanks a lot, guys.
So when we briefed the regulators on October 15th, 2015, we had a cost range of 25 million to 35 million. And we're on the low range, we're on the low side of that today.
Good.
Bob Smith, Gap. Gil asked one of the questions and answered part of mine, which was the cost.
You got to get closer for me. Thank you.
One of my questions was, what is the cost, which you just answered, but what is the benefit? What's the projected advantage or economics or timeline issues for this?
Well, feasibility study is planned after the demonstration is complete. The feasibility study will include technical and efficiency, cost efficiency. At that point, we'll look at what it costs. And that's why we're doing a demonstration. We'll look at what it costs. We'll look at the dollars per gallon. We'll make comparisons to other treatment techniques. And we owe that to the Department of Energy so they can make a decision on future tickers.
I mean, the benefit would be it's supplemental treatment in addition to the salt waste processing facility. And basically it's about another, I think it's a little over 1 million gallons a year that we could be treating via the TCCR, you know, in addition to the volume that goes over to SWPF.
Okay, I understand that, you know, you're going to do the evaluation and,
Sure.
and do the economics following the evaluation, but I would think that there was some kind of a projected or forecasted savings for DOE to have to look at to say, yeah, we want to spend this 25 million.
Well, that's all part of the demonstration, right?
So Michael McLane is DOE. The benefit of the demonstration of TCCR was that it was an application of a technology that allowed us to successfully negotiate a resolution of the tank cleanup milestones. This was an important part of bringing on extra capability until we could bring the salt waste processing facility. That's the major benefit, was it allowed us to successfully resolve those milestone issues. And you can't put a cost on that.
35 million.
I think Shelley wanted to clarify.
Yes, Shelley Wilson with South Carolina DHEC. So, you know, I tell you, but just about every time I come, that the high-level waste is one of the biggest priorities for DHEC, getting that waste treated so that the risk can be reduced for the community and the state. And so this was a very important part of the settlement agreement that we signed Halloween of last year, getting this additional treatment capacity dedicated. And the agreement actually calls for a second unit if this one proves to be successful and worth the cost. But some of the history that we have with Savannah River site is that that oftentimes if we have some defense in depth for treatment, or a plan B if the plan A falters at some point, that defense in depth really serves to help keep the whole program strong. So again, for example, with transuranic waste, about 95% of that has been shipped. A lot of that, I believe, is because there were more, there were some defense in depth and the ability of the site to be able to package that waste and get it shipped off for disposal. So we're just trying to build that infrastructure, encouraging, and DOE is of course leading the treatment, but we're encouraging building a strong multi-layered treatment infrastructure. And so especially what can we learn from this? Can it grow? Is it worth it to grow? Or can it be a fallback plan B if there are some difficulties in the future? So again, looking at, don't put all your eggs in one basket. This is such a large focus area and the need for risk reduction that we're really encouraging and bolstering that defense in depth, and so that we have more than one approach at how to get that risk reduced, because we're looking at time. And more than one approach to get that risk reduced in a timely fashion.
All right. Well, speaking of time, we are out of it. Jeff, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. You can turn those back into the guys back there. All right. So, Earl, I heard a rumor that you have an announcement to make. Reinhardt's. Earl says that everybody who's interested in having lunch together should meet at Reinhardt's.
Are you giving me a ride?
Yeah. He might also pay. You never know. All right, everybody. We're going to see you back here at 12:45, please. 12:45. Thank you.